Welcome to the show. My guest today is Dennis Riley, the Vice President of Federal Sales for Gigamon. Dennis, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jason.
Let me set some context for our discussion today. This concept of cyber risk management has been gaining steam over the last few years. The idea of an organization that can secure everything is just unrealistic and really impossible. Starting in 2015, the Office of Management and Budget pushed agencies to identify high-value assets and secure them first and foremost. Over the last 2 years, the Homeland Security Department has been helping agencies get their minds around managing their cyber risk. DHS has conducted 100 security architecture reviews and risk and vulnerability assessments. DHS is planning another 60 reviews for 2018. At the same time, agencies submitted to OMB their risk management reports earlier this year as part of meeting the requirements for the Cyber Executive Order issued in 2017. This was really the first time agencies have a consistent review of their cyber risks. It also lets them map threats to capability to investment, as well as use their FISMA, Federal Information Security Management Act metrics to track and assess their own cyber risks. Now, all this data lets OMB and DHS really compare apples to apples across the agencies for the first time when it comes to cyber risk. So how do agencies move forward to do more to understand their risks? How do they buy down their risks? How do they ensure their employees have the proper skill sets to manage this process of buying down and managing their risks? Well, that's where our guest comes in, Dennis Riley, the Vice President of Federal Sales for Gigamon. So let's start with this concept of buying down risk. Talk a little bit about that, what that really does mean.
Sure. So Tom Bossert at the White House, the Homeland Security Advisor to the President, talks about that frequently. The idea being that there'll never be enough budget to counter the increasing and well-financed and highly threatening adversary. So it's important for the federal government, and we have a responsibility as a federal government to use every cybersecurity dollar to get the maximum return on buying down that risk. And there's lots of different models that you can look at in terms of risk reduction, but it really comes down to three factors: people, processes, and technology. If we take people first, that's the toughest one, I think. There's been some surveys that have been sponsored by NIST that show that there's currently 780,000 cybersecurity positions in the U.S., and 350,000 of them are open today. Worldwide, it's expected to grow to about 3.5 million positions by 2021 that are going to be open, about 500,000 here in the U.S. So that's a tough problem. No matter what we do as a government, I think it's going to be very difficult to close that gap. We need great people. We need to train and retain them, but the gap's never going to be closed. So we have to look at processes and technology to be a game changer. Processes will continue to improve, but that's generally going to be in response to a threat. So as much as we improve our processes and our techniques, that's probably not going to be a game changer for us. I really think it comes down to technology. It won't be technology alone, but technology is where we can have a big game changer. And we've got some tremendous advantages here in the U.S. With cybercrime being a $6 billion program by 2021, there's a high profit motivation. So there's a lot of venture capital and a lot of smarts going into how can we use technology to counter nations' threats, cyber criminals, and hacktivists. So I think that's the place to look. But what's important is, and if you go to the RSA conference out in San Francisco, there's thousands of vendors out there. So the noise associated with these new cybersecurity tools is significant. So I think the challenge for the government and for industry is to find those handful of technologies that are real force multipliers, so that can make a big impact on the cyber fight, make it more of an equal fight. Right now, I think it's asymmetrically to the advantage of the attacker against the defender, and find those and implement those technologies quickly to get that force multiplier effect and get the maximum return on the cybersecurity budget dollar.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. Let me back us up for a minute. One of the things when you talk about spending every dollar smartly, that's part of that is understanding those risks. And the high value assets that I mentioned in the beginning is the first step in that direction. Do you get a sense from your agency customers that they understand where their high value assets are?
I think we're making good progress in the executive order, and IT modernization, talk about that. Historically, we've looked at security from the outside in, have a strong perimeter, keep the bad guys out. We know that no longer works. That's widely accepted. And I see more and more agencies thinking about security from the inside out. Know what I have in my environment, know where my data is, know what's happening on my network, and then secure it. So the underlying premise there is you need to be able to see it to secure it. So you have to have visibility. Data at rest, encrypt it, know who's on your network with strong identity management. The tougher problem that I think agencies are finding is the data in motion that traverses a network. And the reason that's becoming a tougher problem is it used to be we just had the physical infrastructure, but now we have the virtual environment, the software-defined environment, and as you know, with the current administration, a move to the cloud. So it becomes a much more complex problem. And in the situation of the cloud service provider is not part of my immediate enterprise. I'm relying on that outside third party, yet I, as an agency head, am still responsible for that data. And frankly, I think that one of the reasons why there's been a slower adoption of the cloud is that agency heads have, and chief information officers and CISOs have said, geez, even though I move that data to the cloud, I'm still responsible for the security of that data inside the cloud.
Is that issue of responsibility or understanding the accountability piece, can't that be built into the cloud provider? Can't they be built into the hardware, software, the tools that the cloud provider uses that can tell me as the CISO or the CIO that my data is secure?
So there's a distinction there, right? So, and companies like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft will tell you this, that we are responsible for the security of the cloud, but the agency, the customer, remains responsible for security of their data inside the cloud. So just as an agency head and a chief information security officer is going to want to know what's happening to their data at rest and their data in motion in their physical infrastructure and their virtual infrastructure on premise, they're going to want to have that same visibility into the data that's inside the service provider's cloud. Fortunately, there's technology that allows them to do that, but I think what I've been hearing a little bit from agency heads is that we're going to be able to get cheaper computing and more secure computing in the cloud. The reason that a lot of them are thinking that is they're saying, hey, if I modernize my applications and shift them to the cloud, that's an improvement in and of itself, because a lot of these applications were built years or decades ago when security wasn't built in or was at best an afterthought. So by modernizing the application, I'll have more security. Well, that's part of it, but you're still responsible for that data, even though it's going to reside in somebody else's cloud infrastructure.
That's fascinating, the fact that there's still that hesitation, because when I talk to CIOs and my experience of doing interviews and going to see panels, there's always that talk about cloud. And it's much less, well, we're going to dip our toe, we're going to try a pilot, to really, we're really moving to the cloud. But at the same time, it is the low value stuff. It's the email, it's the collaboration tools, it's even test and development to a certain extent. It's not the high value stuff. Do you see that same discussion happening when you talk to clients?
Well, I think you're onto something there, Jason. We can hear what the agency heads say, but we're watching what they do. And they haven't moved the high value stuff to the cloud yet. And I think fortunately now there are solutions out there that are going to allow them to get the same visibility into their data in motion in the cloud as they have on premise. But it's just going to take them a while to get comfortable with that. And then I think you'll see more of those workloads of high value assets shift to the cloud.
We know that the FedRAMP program, the Federal Risk Authorization and Management Program, FedRAMP, is developing a high baseline. So that's for obviously most FISMA high metrics. So that's going to be a big deal as well. And that will help move people to the cloud. We've talked a little bit about cloud. You talked about the different things that can happen, the different pieces that can work on it. We're going to get to workforce in a second. But let's talk about technology first, since you guys are a technology company. Sure. You talked about technology as a multiplier, really to make security better, easier, faster, better, cheaper. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing from a technology perspective.
Sure. If you think of the context of, let's say I have a dozen cybersecurity tools in my security stack. If you can find a force multiplier that gets just 10, 15, or 20% more productivity out of each of those tools, that pays for itself very quickly. So the concept of a security delivery platform, a network packet broker that allows all those cybersecurity tools to work better can pay for itself very quickly. I'll give you a quick example. If you've got an anti-malware tool, and we've done this for several agencies, an anti-malware tool that only wants to see email to make sure no malicious malicious links comes in through the email. You don't want to send that voice over IP, video, or standard web traffic. That's just going to bog down that tool from doing its highly specialized work of preventing malware from penetrating the network. So if you get a next generation packet broker that can filter out all that unwanted traffic, send it only the relevant traffic, that's a tremendous advantage. If you can do that across 10 or 12 tools, you can see where that becomes a force multiplier. I'll tell you where it gets to be even more powerful. And NSS Labs came out with a study that showed that encrypted traffic really bogs down cybersecurity tools. In fact, some cybersecurity tools can't even inspect encrypted traffic. We can talk more about that in a minute. But others will take an 80% performance hit. So if you can use a next generation network packet broker as part of your security delivery platform to decrypt traffic once and send it to a dozen cybersecurity tools and get a 5x multiplier, that's huge. It won't happen with every one of the tools. Sometimes it'll be much less than that, but that's the potential to get a 5x multiplier, and that's a tremendous force multiplier.
And when we talk about 5x multiplier, you meaning define that a little bit better, because I think people hear that and go, so it's going to be 5 times faster, 5 times more data goes through it. What do you define the force multiplier?
Sure. So if a cybersecurity tool has to encrypt its own SSL TLS traffic, it might take a performance hit of as much as 80%. So it'll only be working at 20% capacity. If you can have a piece of the architecture as part of your security delivery platform, that next generation platform that decrypts the traffic once and sends it to 12 tools, well, now that tool is not going to work at 20% capacity. It's going to work at near 100% capacity. So that's where I get that 5x.
And the benefit is the tools will do more for you, and it will make a bigger impact on the security of your network and change your security posture.
Absolutely. So the tools will do more for you. As you get more and more data going across your network, you'll extend the life of those tools. And here's some more information that makes that even more important. Gartner tells us, well, we know that more than 50% of the traffic today going across federal networks is encrypted. Much of that traffic isn't even being inspected today for the reasons I mentioned before. Gartner tells us that by next year, we should expect 80% of the traffic traversing the network to be encrypted. So if you're not inspecting encrypted traffic, or you need to buy 5 times the number of cybersecurity tools to handle that, you either have a very poor cybersecurity architecture. It'd be the equivalent of having 5 doors in a building, but only having a guard and a metal detector on one of those doors, let the other 4 be free flow. And then in terms of having to buy 4 or 5 times the number of cybersecurity tools just to handle the encrypted traffic, that just becomes unaffordable and really unmanageable in your security and network operations centers.
It's interesting you talk about encrypted traffic. And to be clear, that's the idea of using HTTPS, or because when we think of encrypted traffic, we think of, a 256-bit encryption and so on and so forth. But really, that's not what you're talking about generally, are you?
We're talking about, SSL and not TLS traffic traversing the network so that it's encrypted and can't be, snooped upon as it goes, across your network. That can also be important in terms of data exfiltration. If we go all the way back to the OPM breach, that data was being exfiltrated through an encrypted channel. So there'll be times that you'll want to be able to decrypt the traffic when it's leaving your enterprise as well. So both situations, inbound and outbound encrypted traffic, are worthy of inspection, or you simply don't know what's going on in your network. And if you can't see it, you can't secure it.
We're going to take a quick break. Before we do that, let me just ask you, are agencies understanding that they can have these force multipliers, that they exist, that they can do more with what they have versus buying more?
I think they are. And I would point to the Continuous Diagnostic and Mitigation Program. And we at Kagan are pleased to be part of that program. We were added to the contract after it was initially awarded, because there was a recognition that you need more than just cybersecurity tools. You have to have a security delivery platform, a next generation packet broker to be a standard part of any cybersecurity infrastructure.
Excellent. And CDM, we could talk all day about it. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.